Karen,
Yes.
we've had it all wrong.
We have?
All of it.
All of it?
The whole shebang.
Oh, man.
We are about to get a wake-up call that has been coming for a very long time, and now it's here.
Well, I guess that's good.
It depends on who you talk to, because what we know about reality, see, it's all wrong. At least that's what our next guest is telling us. And he says that you can actually experience this mind-blowing reality of everything and get a peek at the world behind the world. Are you intrigued yet?
Very.
I know I am. So let's not waste any more time and start the show. My name is Will.
And I'm Karen.
And unlike Mulder and Scully,
we both want to believe.
So we've embarked on a journey of discovery.
We've talked to people deeply entrenched in the spiritual and metaphysical world.
We've thrown ourselves into weird and wonderful experiences. I even joined a coven of witches.
And wait, you joined a coven?
Yep, all in the interest of finding something.
Anything.
That will prove that there's something beyond this physical,
three-dimensional world we all live in.
This is the Skeptic Metaphysicians. Hi, I'm Will.
And I'm Karen.
And today we're diving into the deep end of this stuff. At the top of the show, I mentioned, Karen, that we had it all wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Dr. Howard Eisenberg, a medical doctor with postgraduate training in both psychology and psychiatry, who pioneered the instruction of parapsychology as a regular credit course at the University of Toronto and was in fact awarded the first postgraduate degree in Canada at McGill University for his highly successful parapsychological research on telepathy. And he's here to give us a glimpse into what it's really all about.
Ooh.
Now, Karen.
Yes.
Most of the things that he's going to talk to us about, we might already have had a couple of hints of throughout our show.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be the deep dive to end all deep dives into this stuff, because Howard has been on a lifelong quest to discover the true nature of reality. His book is Dream It to Do It, The Science of Magic, and he's here with us today. Howard, welcome to the show.
Hi, Will and Karen. Glad to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to share this information with your listeners.
Oh,
well, we are very excited to have you on the show, Doctor.
Yeah. This stuff, everyone knows that this stuff is right up my alley. And we've talked about all this kind of reality shifting and Mandela effects and all that kind of stuff. But you go way, way deeper, right? So what excites me the most about when we were first talking is that apparently, like I mentioned, we've got it all wrong. Like, how so?
Well, fundamentally, we think that we're aware and live in the real world. And in fact, we're not aware and we live in an illusion. It's more comparable in a way to a dream. When we have dreams, in our dreams, we think usually it's reality until we wake up afterwards. And right now, in a sense, we're in a dream state. It's actually more like a nightmare state, given the way the world's going right now.
It's not
the
wrong.
point is, it's not the full reality. And if we wake up and understand the fuller, the greater reality, we can wake up from this nightmare and have more peace of mind, more harmony, more well-being universally.
So can we wake up and still be here? Because if this is a dream, my first thought when we woke up was when we're dying.
Yes. Yeah. Because as I understand it, I use the analogy of amphibians like frogs and salamanders. They can live in two different dimensions, water and land. And similarly, I think our nature is also amphibious. We can live on this level of reality, which is a level, as we're commonly experiencing right now. But again, it's not the whole thing. Just for example, like when you see an iceberg above the waterline, the tip of the iceberg, that's a very small amount, proportion of the total mass of the iceberg under the water. So again, we're aware of the surface, but we're not aware of the vastly greater resources within us. And we're very distracted by the outside, and that almost blinds us to what really is within us.
So we've talked a lot about that on the show, about us being multidimensional beings and all that kind of stuff. And there's more to us elsewhere. But Doc, when I dream, if I pinch myself, I can tell I'm dreaming. If I'm pinching myself here, ow. So how can, I mean, it's hard for...
Well, that's what you're thinking, Will, I appreciate that. But I will tell you, over the years, both through my students and lectures I gave to the public broadly, I have posed the question often to them, is there any way that you could absolutely tell that you're not in a dream? And no one to this day, including very eminent scientists nationally, has ever been able to answer that question, to absolutely say there's no way that you're in a dream. Because when you're in a state, you don't necessarily know you're in that state. I mean, similarly with things like hypnosis, we can hypnotize somebody to not be aware of certain things that normally they would be aware of and other people would be aware of. So again, the mind can filter things, distort things. Unless we, understand that, we're confused by, as they say, and live in that illusion type of life.
Okay.
Wow.
That's a hard one because intellectually I'm thinking I can tell I'm not in a dream because I can feel myself. I'm not.
Okay, so let me give you an example
Okay.
of one of my students' experience with this. So I taught them, as I teach in my book, how to control dreams. We call it dream programming or lucid dreaming.
Mm.
So I gave them an assignment. This was at the University of Toronto in my parapsychology undergraduate class. And I explained again the concept. And I told them to try to modify a dream in the middle of a dream, to become awake, in other words, in the dream, but not totally awake, be able to modify the dream. And then when they woke up in the morning, to have a pad by their bedside and to write down immediately what they remembered doing. So one of my students reported he had a dream about remembering the instruction I gave them in the class to try to alter the dream in some way and write it down as soon as you awaken. So he did that. And then in the morning he awakened and he looked at his notepad and it was blank. So he had a dream within the dream.
Mm. I'm still not 100% sure I understand how, because to me it seems pretty obvious that this reality feels very physical to me. But let's go beyond that for a second, because I'm really curious about if indeed we are in an illusion, if we're in a dream like state,
Mm-hmm.
why? Why would we be here? Why is life the way it is now?
Okay, so what do most of us do when we're bored in our minds?
Daydream?
We daydream, right? Because we're bored.
Mm-hmm.
And our understanding is that we're all collectively in this same dream. It's not just you having your own dream and everybody else is having their own dream. We're collectively in this dream. As Shakespeare puts it, all the world's a stage and we're all players on it. But at a deeper level, we're all connected. We all come from one source, which we sometimes call the source. I use another expression in my book called universal mind. Some people would call it God consciousness. So it's the source we all come from. So let me take your question back another level. If we all come out of the consciousness, the mind of the source, God consciousness, for what reason? As we understand, for example, God, coming back to, looking at it from that lens, we think of God as being omniscient, omnipotent, having all knowledge, all power. So if God has all, then why bother to create us and the rest of the world? And I go back to our human experience when we're bored. We daydream. For God to be able to manifest the fullness, and I rather use the word source because it doesn't have some of the notations we have, emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
For source to be able to, in a sense, to experience its fullness, it needs to dream us up. And in a way, we're extensions of that source, and we enrich the experience of source. When we fall in love, many of us are particularly aware of looking in our loved one's eyes. And we don't have to talk very much when we first fall in love. There's just a sense of connection. And it's like source recognizing itself in one of the manifestations of us as seemingly individual separate people. It's hard to overcome the bias that if we, feel confident about something, we must be correct. But it's not a good reliable source of information. Emotion is feeling, but it's not wisdom. I mean, when you look at what's happening right now in your country, where you have, if I could put it one way, one reality, thinking conventionally right now, and yet you have two very large blocks of observers of that reality totally disagreeing on what the facts are, totally across the board. And you might think, well, if you show them something contrary to what they think, then they'll see the light, we'll convince them. No. When we have fixed beliefs and we don't realize it ourselves, it's like blinders. It's like filters. It blocks our greater awareness.
We're going deep into this now.
You dove in. I'll dive with you.
Absolutely. No, I love this stuff. This is great. You mentioned something a little earlier, and it gave me pause. You mentioned source dreaming us up. Are you saying then, I'm afraid to ask the question, but are you saying that you feel that we are just figments of God's or source's imagination?
Well, first, I don't feel it. I know it.
Oh.
And it's not just imagination. And I want to come back and talk to you about imagination in a very different way, but I'll just go back and quote the Bible for a moment, where Jesus says, I and the Father are one, but the Father is greater than I. So we're not the whole enchilada. We're not the whole package. We're a figure on the stage, but we are connected to the grand producer director. And we can learn, which I again try to explain in my book, some of the techniques for this, how to access that deeper level of knowledge, of empowerment, of resourcefulness. Now, I just want to come back on imagination, because in our culture, we usually dismiss imagination. So it's just imagination. You're just imagining that. It's imaginary. And that again is another example where we have it so wrong, back to the wrong fall of reality, wrong understanding of it. Imagination is actually the source of everything. Everything that has been discovered in science, everything that's been invented, has first come out of imagination. In my book, I detail some of the most famous scientists, and that's how they receive their understanding, their insight. Even people like, Einstein was considered a mathematical genius as an adult, but he actually began his experimentation to learn the nature of reality when he was young at 16. At 16 years of age, he imagined riding a beam of light through the universe. And that's what eventually led to the theory of relativity and E mc squared. Not all the math later on in life.
Right.
He was envisioning it. Nikola Tesla was tutored in the ancient Vedic philosophies of India, and he was an inventor, and he is the one who invented the infrastructure for what we now call our modern electrical system, and, for example, AC generation. And he would imagine these contraptions in his mind visually. He would get them running. He would operate it like a simulation to see what's working, what's not working, what needs to be tweaked. So again, our whole understanding of what science has brought us is totally flawed. It's come through imagination, not through calculation, not through laboratory experiments. And imagination is powerful. The placebo effect, coming back to, again, more common frame of reference, the placebo effect is mind over matter. When you believe something that chemically is inert, has no real effect, has some power over you, often you will feel, mentally and physically that effect because of your belief. Belief can shape reality, and we don't understand when we're caught in our belief system where the filters are, where it's obscuring or distorting the greater reality.
You were saying that there's a difference between someone feeling like something's right and knowing that it's right, because feeling is an emotion and knowing is not.
Exactly.
How do you know? How do you know that this is true?
In two different ways, and it's a good question, Karen. And as you partly also said, in the introduction, I've been on this quest for a long time. I'm at 77 now, and it's almost been my entire life to try and understand the nature of reality, just how do things work, why are things a certain way, and so on. And it was something that just came to me very naturally as a natural sort of curiosity. It was spurred partly too as an adolescent when I'd read science fiction, which is like speculative things that could happen. And seeing years later, some of those things that were pure speculations becoming actual reality, material reality. I also always, from an early age, liked challenge. And as I was learning more about science, I became more and more aware of how controversial psychic phenomena, the whole field of parapsychology was. And in my case, that just increased my interest in learning more about it and eventually doing research in this area, which I eventually did do at McGill, as you were mentioning earlier, and set up that telepathy experiment, which had extremely successful outcome and was independently replicated after I did this experiment by another student. It just kept growing and growing, this desire to know, to understand. But it was always with a scientific lens. And in other words, I wasn't basing it just on what I was told to believe or what people believe traditionally or emotionally, what felt comfortable or not comfortable. I really was looking at it scientifically, like what makes sense. Test it out in some way, research it more. And then back to your question, in 2018, I was invited to present a keynote presentation to the annual conference of the Association of Healers. And I hadn't been involved as much in parapsychology for almost a half century since I wrote my book and had my course at the university. I went into the realm of corporate consulting internationally, training, management consulting, and also coaching. And additionally, and still do, have a medical practice and psychotherapy. So I still see patients, and that's how I spent my earlier day today. It's still quite a mix, but back to the question.
Yeah.
So in 2018, again, to honor the invitation that I was given to be a keynote for an annual conference, I did a very deep dive into a half century of the parapsychological literature since I had last been deeply immersed in it, teaching at university and writing my own textbook. And also the latest findings in quantum mechanics, the leading edge of physics, and also comparative religion, looking at what we were learning about some of the differences and similarities of various religions. Revisiting the indigenous teachings, which I could go into as to why. Looking at what was happening recently with the research that's opened up again with psychedelic drugs. Looking at the latest neurological findings on neuroplasticity, how our thoughts can actually physically rewire our brain. So looking at all that, again, that data dump, still through a scientific lens. And then all of a sudden, and I mean by sudden, in a minute or two, I had what people would call a revelation, or some might more cynically say an insight. Suddenly the dots all connected. And I suddenly realized, still looking with a scientific lens, so to speak, that everything out there was not so absolute and independent of us. That the only thing, and this is my chapter 2, the only thing we could be absolutely aware of, any of us, is we're aware of being aware. You can't always be aware of truth because, again, it can be biased, distorted in various ways, or your brain may be affected by something, whatever. But that is something to really hold on to. And when I had that realization that ultimately it's all just coming from the mind, it's not out there and fixed. I had also a moment of almost a combination of sadness and panic. And it was like, oh my gosh, I'm all alone. Like if it's all just my imagination, I'm all alone. But quickly, fortunately, that flipped into a greater realization. No, I'm not alone. I'm connected to everyone and everything. So to answer your question, deep answer. But that's how I came to this understanding, this knowledge, not just a belief. And when you understand this deeper level that we can access, you can work with it. So I also, in my book, give some of the techniques for people to actually experience it themselves as they're reading the book. Don't have to go off to an ashram for years to be trained.
You've convinced me. I'm picking up your book. It sounds amazing. It sounds wonderful to have that kind of awareness.
I'll also share with you too, well, again, I had written a book, as I said, a half century ago, and it was also used as a textbook for my course. So it was a scholarly book. But when it came time to write this up as a book, from this awareness that we're all coming from source, that we're all connected, and also the awareness that, as I said, in a way, on this level of reality, we're in a nightmare right now. Like it's like a dystopian reality. I felt called, I felt compelled to speak out, to share what I've learned with others before we totally self-destruct, because we're making such a mess at everything by almost every measure. This, we thought not so long ago we were going to the golden age, progress. And now it's so different. Very hard for almost any of us, for ourselves, and worse for, kids and grandchildren to think like the times are ahead. It doesn't have to be this way.
This is the feel-good portion of our show.
Is it too late to change?
No, but I think the window's narrowing. And that's why I felt such an urgency to issue what I really consider this as a global wake-up call. In 2 days, I'm doing an invitational lecture to the faculty of the University of Toronto, which will be live streamed around the world. Speaking this directly, I have a 1-hour opportunity to try and explain this in a coherent way to people all over the world simultaneously. That's my plan 2 days from now.
Wow.
Now, do you think it's because we are not aware that we're heading straight for this disaster?
Absolutely. I mean, come back to this. We're so unaware, as I say, that this is just one level of reality. We're so unaware that we come from the source. And we believe the opposite. We believe that we're all separate from each other. We believe we're also separate from all other aspects of nature. So that makes us more maybe fearful of others. They're separate, or competitive with others. And it leads us to, in a sense, almost rape our planet, which we've been doing, and use it as a dumpster to just dump whatever we don't need anymore. So that illusion of separation from each other and our earth and everything on this planet is what's causing it. And that's why when I say wake up call is to wake up and realize, no, this is just one level of awareness. There's something much more deeper and profound and way more important right now for our survival.
Doc, you had mentioned that this is the tip of the iceberg that we are experiencing right now. And the fact that we're not all aware of that is what's causing our separation and causing these dangerous things to happen in this world. Now, there's one thing that will make this all better, and that is the organizing principle behind the universe. If we wake up to it. Now, Tell us, what is that?
Well, I'll quote the Bible for a moment. God is love. And as strange as it may seem, and I don't mean just in a religious sense when I say this to you, there was a psychiatrist, Eisenberg, who had a spontaneous mystical experience, a sense of a oneness of the allness, as it's sometimes referred to. And he wrote it up as a book called Cosmic Consciousness. And in his book, he thought he had, as well as the experience, had come to the insight that love was the connecting principle of the whole universe. When I first read that book a few decades ago, it didn't make any sense to me. I thought, I guess he's lost it. Now, yeah, well,
As most people would, yeah.
but now hopefully with some wisdom, through my studies and this experience I had recently, as I mentioned to you, I came to understand it very differently. Love connects us. It's fear and hate that separate us. And the people who are stoking fear and hate in the population are the ones who are causing all this divisiveness.
So cut it out.
Yeah, right. And again, I repeat, there's different levels of reality, and I'm working with more than one even as we talk, so it was not too confusing. So I'll come back to, again, this sort of conventional reality we're in right now, this level of it, which is superficial. In this level, we assume that our consciousness, our mind, comes from our head brain. But Will and Karen, there's actually no proof of that. There's like none. I don't mean a little bit. There's none. There's not even a theory, a general theory that can explain how the material brain can generate subjective and material consciousness. And yet people just assume it's true. And also on this level of reality, again, conventionally, let's call it, it's assumed we also only have one brain in our body. Not true. We all have at least three brains. We have a heart brain and also a gut or microbiome. And just to come back to the heart for a minute, because we were talking about love, unknown to many people, the heart brain has neurons, nerve cells. The heart brain has its own memory system. The heart brain has more nerves that can control head brain function than the head brain can modify in the heart.
Wow.
The heart has memory. The heart's like an intuitive channel, intuitive portal. The heart could even secrete the love hormone, oxytocin, which again connects us, gives you loving feelings.
Wow.
Ancients used to believe that our wisdom came from the heart. We, in our enlightened, sense that we know it all, thought, no, it's all in the head. It's not. And now we're unfortunately going further that way with AI, artificial intelligence. I mean, if humans don't have heart, what we can expect of AI?
Yeah.
Yeah. I told you you're going to like it, Karen.
I know. I love it. I love it. And I do kind of get what you say, it's about the love, but then the fear and anger and all that comes in. And I think that's just what replaces the love. Like when the feelings of love aren't there, then what kind of fills in those voids are fear and anger and hate and desperation. And I think a lot of people, and this is just my opinion, but I think a lot of people feel like when we talk about love, it has to be like a romantic love or a mother-child love, but it's just so much more to it than that. Love can express itself.
It's connection.
Absolutely. And it's connection to everything.
It's like, because it is. I mean, it's again, we're extensions of source and we're seeing each other on that level. It is more of a, we're getting both levels. We're getting the individuality, but also that deep sense of connection. And love is also very fragile, though, in this level of reality. I mean, so many people who set off to be married and think they're committing for life, no matter what, sickness or health, whatever it might be, don't stay together, or if they do, not happily. And one of the things that makes it difficult to sustain loving when we're also somewhat like individuals in this level of reality is ego. I'm actually working on another book now on ego. So when we first meet someone we fall in love with, we just so enjoy the company. We're maybe fascinated that they like some of the things we like, or that some of the things they tell us about, other aspects of life that we didn't know about before and enjoy. But then after a while, we get judgmental. Why do you always have to be that way? Why can't you do it my way? Why can't we do it now? Why is it always to be later? Why do you always do that? And we get more and more again into this separation, ego, competition in a sense, and judgment. And we forget what it was that was so rewarding to us. As I mentioned, I still work as a medical doctor doing psychotherapy, and in couples counseling, it's often struck me out when couples are disconnected. One way you know that without being, a specialist is there's so little eye contact. Or if there is, it's like a glaring contact. It's not like soft, warm, open eyes. When we're walking about and maybe passing a young infant in a stroller, let us say, or something of that nature, babies often will look at the eyes of strangers unless they've been, made fearful by their own parents. And adults who aren't too shy or embarrassed meet the gaze of the baby, often smile, because it's just such a good feeling to connect. And we're losing that These smartphone screens don't quite do it.
Yeah.
It's illusion. And it's taking us in the other direction.
So a couple of things. Earlier on, you dropped something that said that you were working on several different levels at the moment. Can you explain that to us? Because I know that you're here with us right now having this conversation, but then it seemed to me that you said you were also at the same time existing on another plane as well. Did I understand that correctly?
Well, yes, but it's not just me. I mean, I explained.
Sure,
in our-
but you might be more aware of it than
yes,
the rest of us.
exactly. And I'm more able to, how should we say, go between them.
Okay. So what is that other awareness like?
Well, it's that feeling, that connection, that knowing of just being one with everything.
So you feel connected at all times with everything.
No, I didn't say all the time.
Oh,
Again, we're amphibious beings, so
got
I
it.
mean,
Got it. But you can flip back and forth between it at
Yes.
will?
relatively.
Oh,
Relatively.
that's amazing. That's something that you feel anyone can do. Because I understand what you mean. I've felt that level of
Mhm.
connection before, and I've talked
Mhm.
about it on the show,
Mhm.
and it was astounding. But I haven't been able to hang on to it. I go to sleep the next morning, it's gone. It's an elusive feeling. So
It is elusive because there's an expression, the only constant is change.
Mhm.
It goes back to the Greek philosopher Heraclitus. Or in Buddhism, they talk about impermanence, the principle of impermanence. So everything changes. Everything's in flux. So it's not just your experience. Everything, as we understand it, is in flux. Nothing is static. Even getting back to source consciousness, even for this, there has to be some irregularity, some randomness. Let me come back to your conventional human way of looking at things right now. If you had a particular TV show that you enjoyed watching, a series, let us say, and for some reason, going forth from a certain point, every time you went to watch your show, it was the same episode every time. And there were no other shows and no other channels. I mean,
shoot
not
me
only would
now,
it no
please.
longer be something you'd find desirable, entertaining, interesting, it would become boring and
Mhm.
perhaps very noxious, irritating. So
True.
back to source consciousness. For source consciousness to have a sense of fulfillment, there has to be change.
Okay.
I think it's just the nature of things. And when we talk about manifestation, which is very real, by the way, as I said earlier,
Mhm.
everything does come from imagination. And there's actually steps to it, which I describe in my book. But coming back to it for a moment, as real as it is, and it is real if you do it the right way,
Mhm.
it's not like a one-to-one correspondence or like when you flip a light switch, that just because you do all the right things, it absolutely has to happen exactly as you want it to and when you want it to and where you want it to. What it will do is increase the probabilities of your desired outcome. But because everything's changing and everything's in a certain level of flux, it's not like it's guaranteed that way.
And you have absolutely no doubt that this is 100% fact.
Strange as it may seem, yes, as I said, and I used the word carefully. It was like a revelation in 2018. And it was very powerful emotionally, very powerful. When I was writing this book, Dream to Do It, The Science of the Magic, in a way, I wasn't writing it. As I mentioned, half a century ago, I wrote a previous book on parapsychology at that time, but in an academic frame for university where we used it as a course textbook. This one had a different voice, and I can't even say to you I could recognize it. For example, there's an audio version of my book too, which I had narrated by a female announcer from a different culture, purposely, because this is not about me. It's about the message and teachings. And when I heard her version of my book, at first, it was the strangest feeling for me. Like, I wrote that? This is true.
No, I
My
believe
word.
it. Yeah.
So back to your question. Yeah, something else has been going on here for sure. And given how people have reacted to the book so far, my book is provocative because it's saying again, to back where we started. We're living in this illusion of it's the wrong model of reality and it's causing all the problems we're having in so many different ways all over the world. But there's a magic in this. That's why, I say the science and the magic. We can see the light. We can transform. And that's why I'm speaking out this way for all of us, because we're all connected this way potentially.
Since you had this revelation, on a personal level, how has your life changed?
Well, one way it's changed is the sense, again, of being called a mission. It may seem to you like this is a choice for me to be talking to you about this or having, authored the book. It's not a choice. I feel I have to. Coming back to your question and explain that a little differently. Once I was aware of the fundamental connection between all of us and how our problems were because we had lost that sense of connection. So back to love and, Eisenberg called Path of the Heart. Again, I felt, how can I ignore the suffering I see and the suffering I anticipate coming ahead? Because I also have I don't want to use the word exactly visions, so I don't like see things, outside that you wouldn't see.
Mm-hmm.
But I just know stuff before it happens sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it's not good stuff. How do I stay quiet with that?
Right.
I mean, on one level, I'm a medical doctor and I'm trained to help people. I never thought I'd have to help the world, but right now it's a pretty sick place.
Yeah.
So I have to do what I have to do.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And thank you for your service, because it indeed is what you're doing. A lot of people will take a look at what you're doing and think you've gone off the rails. So along those lines, what has been your experience when you've come out of the closet, so to speak, with this type of information in your field specifically?
Well, that's the interesting thing. It's been incredibly positive.
Oh, great.
Wonderful.
I just had, for example, somebody in Australia just yesterday, message me, and this is what he said, brilliant, and something like wonderful gift to humanity. People that I would have thought of as being very conservative people have really endorsed it big time.
I'm glad to hear that, because we've heard the opposite in a lot of instances.
I know.
So that shows you a lot. I want to go down that rabbit hole deeper, but I've got another question that before we run out of time, I got to ask if this is all the way that it is, that as you're saying, what happens to us when we die? If we are just figments of source imagination, for example.
I'll go back for a moment to an analogy I use in the book and talk about ourselves when we seemingly are individual, separate from each other, as being comparable symbolically to the waves on the surface of an ocean. If you took a fixed photograph of the ocean, you could actually point to certain waves and say, this is a bigger wave, this is a smaller wave, this one's growing, this one's looks like it's receding back into the body. If you're looking at it as a video or in real time, you literally see the waves emerging, forming, and going back into the body of the water. So first of all, I think that's our relationship with source. We're temporary extensions. So when you ask me what happens, if you mean, do I think we have a discrete soul? No, because that would be separation. It's all one. Now, there are people who have, as you may know, very vivid memories, which have been verified, what we call reincarnation. There are people too who claim like they're mediums and they can communicate with the spirits and the seas. Now, a lot of that's confusion. It's not that those things are not possible, but the interpretation is not necessarily correct. So if, for example, if a medium is getting information about someone who's deceased and it's accurate information, it doesn't mean it's coming from a separate soul. It's more like in the cosmic information bank now. There's a lot of, emotional trappings in the interpretations many people have come up with in the New Age, the supernatural, unfortunately, because the essence is simple. One of the things I really also found very interesting was when you look at religion, there's so many of them. In Christianity alone, believe it or not, there are over 40,000 denominations of Christianity in the world right now. I think we have over 45,000. Just Christianity.
Holy cow.
And there's so many other religions.
Overachievers.
And many of them, of course, claim to be, the right one, the exclusive one, and all the other ones are wrong.
Absolutely.
Even some might argue inspired by a devil, somehow like enemy, limited if they can. Aldous Huxley, in his brilliance, looked at what's in common to all these major religions. Maybe that's closer to the truth. And I think it's a really good way, of approaching things like what's in common to all of this. In signal noise detection theory, they talk this, increasing the recognition of the information, the signal from the noise. If you have a poor connection with someone, say by phone, and you have trouble hearing them, if they keep repeating the same thing over and over again, eventually some of the gaps cancel out or the distortion or static, and you hear the message more clearly. So you look at the commonality, what's in common. That's more likely to be closer to truth. Have I blown your minds yet?
From hello.
Right. You're leaving us speechless, which rarely ever happens.
Right. It all sounds wonderful. Accessing this principle of love as the organizing principle of the universe, accessing that awareness that we're all connected, that we're all one, being able to wake up to that reality. Aside from buying your book, is there one thing that someone listening to this right now could do right now that could start that process for them?
Yeah, and that would be to learn meditation, a proper technique, because that helps you become more aware of what's within and have more control to not be caught up by distraction.
What do you mean by a proper technique?
So meditation is a 1,000-year-old practice
Mm-hmm.
in many different cultures. But as with many things, there are people who distort it sometimes and say, like, oh, for example, only their way is the right way.
Gotcha.
And as
Okay.
with religion, it isn't that simple.
Mm-hmm.
There's different strokes for different folks,
Mhm.
and there are proper ways to do it. Many people have a fundamental misunderstanding of meditation to begin with. They think if you're doing it properly, or if you're able to do it, you should be able to clear your mind. It doesn't work that way. When we say the mind is always active, it's like monkey mind. What you do learn in meditation is not to be caught up by your distraction, to stay in control of your attention.
So are you a proponent of guided meditations or sitting in silence? I know there's a lot of different thoughts
I
on
think
that.
for a lot of people, it's easier to start with a guided meditation. And I have one of my own recordings, the Tranquility Experience. But I think ultimately you want to do it by yourself, and you don't need any special equipment or place to do it. One of the most common ways historically, and still one of the most fundamental ways, is with your own breath. I give those instructions in my book. It's not complicated. So one of my meditations, for example, that I describe, I call shower meditation. So in shower meditation, you try to have all of your awareness focused on the sensations you're experiencing physically in the shower, the spray of the water, the temperature, the aroma perhaps of the soap or shampoo or conditioner, whatever you're using, the sensations as you're applying it to your body, and no thinking outside the shower. So it's not thinking out of the box. So you're not thinking about what you have to do next, or broadly your to-do list, or something you remember something you'd forgotten and you want to write it down as soon as you can. You're using it as a discipline to just have your concentration exercised by focusing it exclusively on just sensation in the shower. And you don't need to have any special apparatus in your shower. You don't need candles or incense. You don't even have to take any longer than you would for a normal shower. But it's an opportunity, and I think simply not a difficult way, to work with meditation.
I never thought about that. That's great. And it's a nice, easy way to kind of get started on it.
Yeah.
And
Right.
you can do
And I
something a
describe
little
that
longer
in
than a
more detail in my
shower.
book.
So really it's about being in the moment, as focused as possible.
Yes, because the moment is all that there is. I say, like, the now is your point of power. The past, so to speak, right? It's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Can't go back, can't cry over spilled milk, right? And the future, we can't control.
Yeah.
That's why it's the future. All we can do is influence. So again, we can change the probabilities.
Karen, now hearing that story or that meditation in the shower, turns out I've been meditating a lot more than I thought I was.
There you go. You just have to stop thinking about it's Thursday.
Yes. Oh my God. That monkey mind does not stop. It is terrible. But Doc, this has been eye-opening, thrilling, exhilarating, everything all at the same time. If someone wanted to reach out to you to go deeper into this stuff, what's the best way for someone to do that?
My website, it's drhowardeisenberg.com.
Well, we're going to add a direct link to that website as well as to your book. So anyone who's interested can just go to skepticmetaphysician.com and you can access his book and his website directly from the show notes. But I don't think we've even come close to covering this topic.
I think we're only up to chapter 2.
Not even. I don't think we've gotten to chapter 2. I'm going to get the book because I think it sounds fascinating, right up my alley. And I hope that we get an opportunity to talk again in the near future.
Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity, Will, Karen.
Thank you.
And a huge thank you to you. Yes, you, the person that hit play on this episode. We know that there are tons of options out there, and having you decide to come along on our journey of discovery with us is an absolute honor for us. Well, that's all for now. We will see you on the next episode of The Skeptic Metaphysician. Until then, take care.